Hey, how's it going? It's Osama. We're back with another YouTube video. This is going to be the third video in the series for puppy foundations. Today we're going to be talking about building a bond with your puppy. It's basically going to be broken down into 4 different things. I call it the FORT method. That means F, O, R, and T. We have F for fair, O for outings, R for routine, and T for trust. So I'm going to be walking around with Raven, same as I always do with one of the dogs. And we're going to kind of go through each one independently and tie them all together in the end. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and start with Raven. When we talk about the F, which is fair, in this category, you're talking a lot about the needs of the dog that you have and whether or not the expectations and the goals that you have are going to be able to meet the needs of this dog. Okay? Up. So, for example, good girl. For example, if I have a husky and I want them to be a companion dog who's just gonna hang out with me all day, is this something I put on the dog based on the needs of the dog? So if that needs of that dog are gonna be to run around all day and they're a very high energy dog, I need to be fair in the way that I set my expectations on what the dog is capable of. I also need to be fair in the boundaries and criteria that I set for the dog. And a lot of times people misunderstand what fair means, and fair just means what are the exceptions that you create. So if I'm gonna be upset at my dog later on, for example, for jumping up at me, I shouldn't allow this to be a behavior that's rewarded or praised when they're a puppy, because this is gonna be unfair at some point in time. So when I'm building a good relationship, I wanna be fair in the way that I set my boundaries on the dog, okay? And ask them to do certain things that I know, for example, I might not really want out of the dog later on. That moves us into number 2, Raven, which is gonna be their outings, their play, their activities. This is probably where 90% of the bonding with a puppy is gonna be happening. So when we talk about the outings or the outlets that you have with your dog, easy. Good girl. When we talk about the outlets that you have with your dog, the way that you play, the way that you interact, the ease of the game's understanding for them is all very crucial. So building a bond is not about coming in and loving on them all the time. As much as that is enjoyable, that's not necessarily going to get you the strongest bond. The strongest bond is going to come from you being the source of all these fun activities and these fun interactions that your dog can have. So your dog is pretty much just here to have fun. So when you become the source of this fun and you develop games or outlets for the dog that are through games that are very easy for the dog to understand and they're very enjoyable for what that dog can do, you start to build a much better bond. So obviously you're not limited, for example, to these, but if I have a retriever, starting some kind of retrieving game with them is going to make me much more interesting to that dog, and soon enough they're going to want to come out of their crate or whatever it is, and immediately they're going to want to interact with me. They're going to want to do that same outlet or that same activity that we've done in the past, and that starts to make them look to me for these fun activities, for these outlets and things like that. And this Raven, good girl, it starts to make them understand that without having me around, they don't necessarily have access to these outlets or activities that they deem more fun than anything they would do on their own. Number 3, that brings us into the R, which is routine. Okay? So when we talk about routine, and we're gonna go ahead and walk to the tree line. When we talk about routine, really what you're talking about here is being predictable in the sense that your dog should understand, kind of back to your boundaries and criterias. Nope. Your dog should understand these boundaries and criterias. They should know and predict that they're gonna have plenty of outings. They should know and predict what's gonna be going on so they don't have to assume any of these things. So a good routine for my dog or for my puppy would include plenty of crate time so they're not overstimulated, they're not getting too tired. Sit. Good. It would include plenty of outings, plenty of free time to pee, plenty of time to explore. Just having a little bit of a hard time. So plenty of free time to explore, plenty of free time to do all these different things, but it's gonna involve, Raven, good girl. Let's get you untangled. And you can see I don't always pull out a dog who's so far in their board and train that they know exactly what to do. So that's fine. I'm not really too concerned. And this is one of those criteria where we talk about fair, for example. Raven, sit. So I'm not really paying attention to her the way I would be if it was just me without me recording the video. So she's starting to get a little bit distracted and she's moving around. She's not at a level where I want to be putting so much pressure on this because that would be unfair. For me to be fair, I would say, okay, she's only about a few weeks into her training, or we've only done so much stuff, so I want her to be at a certain level before I demand that this is not just a game of us walking around a course, but something that you have to do. So bringing that back to routine, your routine is not necessarily the way that you build a good bond or a good relationship, but it's very important in setting up all of the other aspects. Your routine is what develops the regularity of these outlets and how they play them. The routine is what sets it up so that they have free time to explore, time to nap, time to switch off, and time to lay down, and all of these different things. The last one is going to be trust. This is the one that's usually the most misunderstood. When we talk about trust, there's a lot of genetic traits that you can get in a puppy, like being possessive, like maybe being a resource guarder, like being uncomfortable or nervous in different situations. And the way that you handle these things is the most important way to build trust. The way that you handle the dog, if you're gonna talk about grooming, like me being able to do this and pull her and push on her belly and all these things, and having trust in that dog, these things you develop over time and you build them up with puppies. And obviously, as we do future videos, we're gonna break down how exactly you build these things up. But as an initial example, Raven, let's walk. Good. As an initial example, if I have a dog who's maybe a resource guarder as a puppy, I don't want to just go over there and be reaching over and grabbing their food. I want to be setting something up that allows me to build a better relationship with this dog. So if they're a resource guarder, I want to teach them to be more comfortable. I want to teach them that I'm not necessarily a threat to their resources. If they're uncomfortable being touched or handled, or that's something that makes them uncomfortable or insecure, I want to break that down in a way that they build some confidence within me doing this. So it kind of goes back to that first video where we talk about confidence is one of the most important things. Your puppy being confident that you're not necessarily going to do anything to them that might be harmful is very important. These are dogs at the end of the day, and they don't naturally learn how to interact with humans. So it's up to you to decide how all of these initial interactions are going to go. So to summarize it back from the beginning, we have the FORT method, we have FAIR, we have our outlets or activities, we have our R, which is going to be routine, and we have T, which is going to be trust. They're not specific things that you do. It's not instructional. It's more of this is the concept that you want to follow when you're thinking about building a bond with your puppy. You want to be fair to the dog. You want to have good, clear outlets. You want to have good, clear games to play with the dog to build that bond. You want to have a routine that's set for the dog, that's predictable, not in terms of what you play or how you play, but in terms of what they're going to be doing, the free time or outings that they're going to have. And then you want to build trust within all of the things that don't necessarily come naturally to the dog. So her doing these and trusting me to be on the leash is very important. Her allowing me to pet her and handle her and not get uncomfortable is very important. For example, Raven, sit. If I'm holding this food and while she's eating, I decide that I want to be handling the dog, this takes a level of trust for me to be able to grab her paws, grab her ears, grab her body, and grab her tail. This is trust and a bond that I build with this dog. And to be able to do so, we bring that in over time. So some dogs are obviously genetically a bit more social, they're a bit more calm, but that shouldn't make you skip steps. You should take the time out with a puppy to do all of these things to solidify that bond, because down the road, that's when you typically pay the price for not taking the time early on to get this stuff set in stone. So with that being said, in the future videos, we'll be kind of obviously talking more about the outlets and what you can do in terms of creating effective games and effective activities for your dog to make you more valuable. But for the time being, combining the first 3 videos in terms of understanding, okay, how do I use that system of operant conditioning within these things? Where do I apply pressure? Is my pressure fair on the dog? Is my pressure going to help strengthen the understanding of this activity? Or am I just being frustrated at my dog? So if you're being frustrated, you shouldn't necessarily switch quadrants. And that's again something from the previous video. You should be looking to create an activity that's fair for where your dog is at and your dog is able to understand what that activity is. So thank you for tuning in. The next one we'll be talking about socialization. Hope to see you guys there. Thank you.